The silent currency of modern society. You were told you were polite. You were told you were professional. You were told you were a joy to work with because you didn't question the rules, didn't challenge bad decisions, didn't ask uncomfortable questions. And so you learned to smile when you wanted to scream, to nod when you wanted to say no, to comply, not because you agreed, but because it was safer. What you didn't know was that your silence was never neutral. It was always transactional. Every time you swallowed your opinion to keep the peace, every time you chose comfort over confrontation, every time you accepted what you knew was wrong because it's just the way things are, someone else made a profit. We live in a world where silence is currency, not the kind you keep, but the kind they collect from you. It starts early. You learn in school that speaking up can get you in trouble, that raising your hand too much makes you a show-off, that questioning the teacher makes you difficult. So you learn to sit quietly, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've been taught that silence is the cost of approval. And when you grow up, the lesson deepens. You enter the workforce and find that the most rewarded employees aren't the smartest, not the most ethical, not even the most productive. They're the most compliant. They don't challenge the schedule. They don't report toxic managers. They don't demand better pay. They make things easy for the system to run, and in return, the system gives them just enough not to leave. This is the compliance economy, a hidden machinery that turns your obedience into wealth for someone else. Let's be clear, this isn't about conspiracy. It's not a shadowy group pulling strings. It's a culture, a structure, a mindset that has been passed down, normalized, and incentivized. You don't need chains when people are trained to hold themselves back. You don't need violence when silence does the same job. Every protest that never happened, every lawsuit that wasn't filed, every truth that was swallowed has value. To governments that rely on passive voters, to corporations that depend on underpaid labor, to institutions that collapse the moment they're questioned too loudly. This isn't just social, it's economic. Your silence is someone's business model. Let's talk about the workplace. You've seen it. Someone speaks up about unfair treatment, and suddenly they're branded as negative, not a team player or hard to manage. Meanwhile, those who keep their heads down and do as they're told, no matter how unjust the task, are praised, promoted, protected. You're told, don't rock the boat. But have you ever wondered who built the boat in the first place? Who decided what waters it should sail? And most importantly, who profits when you stay seated? In relationships, silence is mistaken for maturity. In politics, for stability. In culture, for respect. But what if silence is just a clever disguise for submission? What if your respectfulness is just what the system hopes you'll never question? This economy runs on the unspoken. It counts on you not to file that complaint, not to start that business, not to push back, not to say, no, I will not do that. Because when you don't resist, the machinery of inequality hums along smoothly, uninterrupted, profitable, silent. And here's the most tragic part. You don't even get credit for your silence. You're not remembered as the one who made peace. You're forgotten. You're not celebrated for being agreeable. You're overlooked. You're not promoted for your patience. You're replaced. Because the system doesn't reward silence, it just uses it. We've been trained to believe that change comes from above, from politicians, executives, leaders. But the truth is, Change begins where silence ends. The greatest revolutions in history didn't begin with fireworks. They began with a whisper, with a single voice saying, "This isn't right." The moment you stop whispering to yourself and start speaking out loud, the moment you stop making peace with injustice to keep your seat at the table, the moment you realize your voice has economic value, the compliance economy begins to break. Because here's the truth that society hopes you never realize. You are not powerless. You've just been quietly profitable. And the moment you see that, everything starts to change. Not because the system got weaker, but because you stopped staying silent.
Praise as a trap. How obedience is marketed as virtue. From the time you were a child, you were taught that being good meant being quiet. Good students sit still. Good kids don't argue. Good employees follow instructions without question. Obedience wasn't just expected, it was celebrated. You were rewarded for it. Smiles, stars, promotions. The quiet kid got extra recess. The compliant worker got a holiday bonus. The agreeable partner was called mature. And slowly, without even realizing it, you began to associate virtue with silence. But here's the truth they don't tell you. Not all praise is genuine. Some praise is strategic. It's not given because you're doing something right. It's given because you're doing something convenient. Let's look at school. Why are the best students often the ones who obey the most? Not necessarily the most creative, not the ones who ask the toughest questions, not the ones who challenge flawed systems, but the ones who memorize well, follow instructions, turn in neat work on time. Why? Because they make the system look like it's working. They don't disrupt the flow. They validate the teacher. They keep the classroom calm. Their obedience is useful, and for that, they are praised. Meanwhile, the child who challenges unfair rules, who speaks up for classmates, who asks, "Why are we doing it this way?" that child is called difficult, disruptive, too much, even if they're right. This dynamic follows you into adulthood. In relationships, the one who never complains is called understanding. In the office, the one who takes on extra work without protest is labeled dedicated. In families, the one who sacrifices their needs to keep harmony is honored as the strong one. But underneath the praise lies a deeper message. We like you better when you make life easier for us. It's easy to praise someone for staying quiet. It takes courage to praise someone for speaking the uncomfortable truth. So society learned to praise obedience and quietly punish dissent. Think about your workplace. You might have been told, "You're so easy to work with." At first, that sounds like a compliment. But is it? Or is it a way to say, "You don't challenge us, you don't set boundaries, you accept whatever we give you," and we like that? Obedience is not just rewarded with praise, it's framed as moral superiority. You're told that speaking up is aggressive, that wanting more is selfish, that questioning authority is arrogant. And so we become ashamed of our needs, afraid of seeming ungrateful, terrified of being seen as the problem. This is how obedience becomes a moral costume. They don't just want you to follow. They want you to believe that following is the right thing to do. They want you to police yourself, to suppress your own truth, not because you're forced to, but because you think you're being good. Let's pause here. How many times have you said yes when you meant no, just to avoid being difficult? downplayed your accomplishments to avoid making others uncomfortable, stayed quiet in a meeting while someone less competent spoke over you because you didn't want to be pushy. You weren't being kind, you were being compliant, and you were likely praised for it. But here's the twist. That praise didn't protect you. In fact, it might have cost you. Promotions that went to louder voices, relationships where your needs were never met, mental health as you constantly swallowed your truth. You became the person everyone liked, but no one truly heard. And this is the trap. You're trained to crave validation. So when that validation comes in exchange for your silence, you give it up again and again. Not because you want to, because the system made you feel proud of your own suppression. It's time to question that. What if being easy to work with is just code for being exploitable? What if being the strong one in your family is just code for being the one who carries everyone else's emotional weight without support? What if being the good one was never about who you are, but about how silent you were willing to be? Let's be clear. Kindness is a virtue. Compassion is powerful. But compliance is not the same as kindness. Silence is not the same as peace. Obedience is not the same as morality. So next time someone praises you for being so easygoing, ask yourself, is this really a compliment? Or is it just a reward for making life easier for everyone but yourself? You don't need to become loud to matter, but you do need to stop equating praise with truth. Because the world doesn't need more people who are agreeable. It needs more people who are awake. And sometimes, awakening begins with this quiet but powerful realization: I am not difficult. I am just done being silent.
Manufactured consent. How systems normalize your silence. Silence isn't just a habit. It's not just your personality. It's not just how you were raised. It's engineered. From the moment you could speak, there were invisible hands shaping how and if you would. Not by force, not through violence, but through something far more effective: normalization. They didn't need to silence you. They just needed to convince you that your silence was your own idea. This is what Noam Chomsky called manufactured consent, the process by which people are conditioned to support, obey, or accept things they would never choose freely, because they're made to believe that those things are normal, reasonable, or necessary. Let's bring this closer to home. Have you ever voted for a candidate you didn't really believe in because there was no better option? Stayed in a job that drains you because that's just how jobs are? Accepted unfair policies because you can't fight the system? That's not consent. That's manufactured compliance. And it didn't happen overnight. Let's look at how this machine works. Step 1, control the narrative. Who gets to tell the story controls the options. Education, media, religion, entertainment, they don't just tell you what to think. They tell you which questions are allowed. They teach you what normal looks like. They tell you that good citizens don't protest, that loyal workers don't complain, that successful people don't struggle with mental health. And over time, you don't even notice the walls being built around your thoughts. You think you're choosing freely, but you've been handed a menu with only 2 safe options. Step 2, reward the passive. Once the system teaches you what's normal, it rewards you when you comply. You get praise for not making things complicated. You get stability for doing what's expected. You get a paycheck, a diploma, a title, but only if you stay inside the lines. You learn to avoid discomfort, not because you're afraid of pain, but because you've been taught
that confrontation equals failure. Step 3. Shame the dissenters. Now comes the punishment. Not physical, social. Speak up in a meeting, and you're too emotional. Question authority, and you're a troublemaker. Say no too many times, and you're difficult to work with. The message is clear. Don't challenge the structure that feeds you, even if it's poisoning you. So instead of risking shame, you choose silence. And when everyone around you does the same, you start to believe silence is just how it's supposed to be. It's not just institutions, it's your own community. Friends will say, "Don't rock the boat." Parents will say, "Be grateful you even have a job." Colleagues will say, "We all deal with this, just survive." They don't mean harm, they've just been trained too. You're not just fighting against a system, you're fighting against a culture that rewards obedience and punishes awakening. And here's the scariest part. The more you stay silent, the harder it is to speak. And the longer the silence, the more natural it feels. Soon, you start policing yourself, censoring your thoughts, laughing when something isn't funny, agreeing when something feels wrong. Not because someone told you to, but because you've internalized the rules. This is what keeps oppressive systems alive. Not brute force, not public fear, but invisible agreement. Agreement that was never freely given, but quietly manufactured. Let's take a closer look at how this plays out in different areas. In schools, you're rewarded for memorizing, not questioning. You learn that challenging authority means detention. Creativity becomes a distraction. Standardized testing trains you to pick the best answer from a list, never to write your own. In workplaces, performance reviews reward those who fit in, not those who challenge inefficiency. HR policies favor the company, not the individual. Speaking up about burnout gets you labeled not a team player. And the phrase, "we've always done it this way," becomes gospel. In government and media, you're told you have a voice, then given one vote every few years. The news floods you with fear, outrage, and distractions, never solutions. Complex problems are reduced to binary choices, and the phrase, "that's just politics," becomes a lullaby for your conscience. And through it all, one message echoes: be grateful, be polite, be quiet. But what if silence isn't maturity? What if it's just programming? What if the system doesn't need you to agree? It just needs you to stay tired, distracted, and afraid of what happens if you speak. Here's the truth. You don't owe the world blind consent. You don't owe your job your silence. You don't owe your community your compliance. You owe yourself one thing: awareness. Because once you realize that your silence has been shaped, you can begin to reshape your voice. You don't have to become a rebel. You don't have to shout from the rooftops, but you do have to question: who benefits from my silence? Who loses when I speak? And when did I agree to this without ever actually agreeing? Your voice isn't just noise, it's currency, and you've been giving it away for free. It's time to reclaim it. Not in anger, not in rebellion, but in truth. Because manufactured consent only works when we stop noticing it's been manufactured.
The economics of submission. Who benefits from your silence? Let's strip away the moral language. Let's put aside the praise, the politeness, the empty talk about teamwork and stability. Let's talk about money. Because behind every system that rewards your silence is a business model that profits from it. Think about it. When you accept unfair pay without complaint, your employer saves money. When you do the job of 2 people but don't push back, your manager meets targets without hiring. When you endure toxic culture in silence, the company avoids lawsuits, training, or reform. When you vote quietly, work quietly, live quietly, you feed a system designed to extract value from your obedience. And the most chilling part? Your silence has a price tag. Not for you, but for them. Let's break it down. 1. Corporations. Corporations are built for one thing: profit. That's not good or evil, it's just truth. But here's where it becomes dangerous. Profit thrives on extraction, and silence makes extraction easy. When workers don't unionize, don't complain, don't speak up, wages stay low, benefits shrink, workloads expand, policies get harsher, and the company's bottom line grows. Have you ever wondered why HR departments exist to protect employees but always seem to side with management? Because HR doesn't exist to serve you. It exists to protect the business from your voice. When an employee files a complaint, it's a liability. When you stay silent, it's a cost savings. You're not just an employee. You're a line item. And the quieter you are, the cheaper you are. 2. Healthcare systems. Silence isn't just profitable in offices. It's profitable in hospitals too. When patients don't question rushed care, when doctors aren't held accountable, when people don't want to make a fuss, errors go unchallenged, negligence goes unchecked, insurance companies save millions. People pay premiums for years and never get care. They're overcharged, misdiagnosed, ignored. But because they stay quiet, the system works. Not for the sick, for the stakeholders. 3. Government. In politics, silence is currency. When citizens don't protest, don't vote, don't question, corruption grows, bad policies pass, budgets are abused, freedoms shrink, and politicians keep their seats. Lobbyists get richer, deals get made behind closed doors because no one's looking. Every unjust law that passed quietly, every surveillance bill you didn't read, every budget cut you shrugged off was a win for someone else, not for you. Your silence is their blank check. 4. Consumer markets. Do you ever feel like everything is just a little broken? Products that stop working after a year, subscriptions that keep charging after you cancel, fees you didn't agree to, data you never consented to share? And you know what happens when you call customer service? You give up. And when you give up, they win. Because the system doesn't need to fix itself if you're too exhausted to fight. That's not bad customer service. That's profitable friction. They make more money when you stay confused, click the wrong box, forget to cancel, get too overwhelmed to demand a refund. Your frustration is designed, and your silence? Banked. Number 5, media and tech platforms. Even algorithms thrive on quiet compliance. You're shown outrage, you scroll, you shake your head, you do nothing. And the platform makes money. You're not the customer, you're the product. Your passivity equals engagement equals revenue. Ever wonder why social media keeps you hooked but helpless? Because it makes billions on your attention without action. If you actually change the world instead of liking a post about it, they'd lose business. The pattern is clear. Across industries, across countries, across ideologies, the formula is always the same. You comply, they profit, you lose power. Here's the brutal truth. The system doesn't fear your voice. It counts on your silence. And that silence is not free.
It costs fair wages, health, justice, dignity, time, truth, all of which are traded away so someone else can meet their quarterly goal. This is not conspiracy, it's economics. You were taught that staying quiet was the polite thing to do, but it was really the profitable thing to do for them. The question isn't whether you're being exploited. The question is, how much are you worth to the system as a quiet person? What would it cost them if you spoke up? What if you said no to unpaid overtime? You called out injustice. You walked away from a job, a politician, a product that disrespects you. You helped others do the same. What if your voice became contagious? The compliance economy doesn't collapse because of protest signs. It collapses when you stop treating your silence like it's worthless. Because it's not. It's the most valuable thing you've been giving away. Reclaim it, because the longer you stay quiet, the longer someone else keeps collecting.
Corporate culture and the price of being reasonable. Let's talk about work. Not the kind of work that inspires or uplifts, but the kind of work that drains you quietly while praising you for being reasonable. The kind of work where the reward for doing a good job is being asked to do even more. And the reward for being quiet about it is being expected to stay that way. In today's corporate world, reasonable has become a euphemism. It doesn't mean fair. It means compliant. It means you're willing to sacrifice without making noise. You've heard it before. Can you stay a little late tonight? You're always so dependable. We're counting on you to smooth things over. You're the calm one. You don't mind taking this on, right? You're reasonable. And at first, it feels flattering. But over time, something shifts. You realize that your reward for being cooperative isn't respect. It's exploitation dressed as praise. The quiet cycle of overwork. Let's walk through it. You do your job well, they give you more. You say yes because you're a team player. They start expecting it. You get no raise, no recognition, just more trust. Now you're not just doing your job, you're doing 2 jobs, maybe 3. But saying no now would seem like you're slacking, because you already proved you could handle it. This is the trap of competence plus silence. You're not just being used, you're training them how to treat you. And once that training is complete, they'll never question why you're drowning, because you never made a sound. Corporate culture doesn't reward balance, it rewards absorption. They don't need to hire another person if you're quietly doing the work of 2. They don't need to promote you if you never ask. They don't need to fix the toxic manager if no one files the report. Your silence saves them money, and they'll dress that savings in words like dedicated, adaptable, a team player. But behind closed doors, they see something else. She won't push back. He'll take it. They won't risk leaving. Let's talk meetings. You have ideas. You have insight. But you've seen what happens when others speak up and get dismissed, or worse, punished. So you nod. You take notes. You wait for your chance. But it never comes. Because silence doesn't demand space. It gives space away. And then you watch someone with half your experience say something louder, less thoughtful, and get all the credit. You think, maybe next time I'll speak up. But next time comes, and you hesitate. Because now you're the quiet one, the agreeable one, the one who keeps things running, not the one who rocks the boat. And let's be honest,
In many companies, culture fit means you know how to shrink yourself. You don't ask too many questions. You don't push for change. You smile in the hallway even when you're running on fumes. And when you burn out, they'll send you a fruit basket, then replace you in 2 weeks. Not because they're cruel, because you were never meant to last. You were meant to perform quietly.
The emotional cost of being reasonable. You start to question your own value. Internalize guilt when you set boundaries. Apologize for resting. Feel invisible, but afraid of being seen the wrong way. You tell yourself, it's just work. Everyone's tired. But deep down, you're not just tired, you're depleted. Spiritually, mentally, emotionally. Because being reasonable at work isn't just about productivity, it's about identity erosion. They don't just want your time, they want your compliance on autopilot. That's why you're told, don't take things personally. Be flexible. Pick your battles. That's just how she is. It's not worth making a big deal. Each phrase is a brick, and brick by brick, they build a cage around your voice. What happens when you finally say no? You've seen it. Someone speaks up calmly, professionally, and gets labeled difficult, aggressive, not a culture fit. The problem was never what they said. The problem was that they said it at all. In these environments, silence isn't just preferred, it's expected. And when you break that pattern, you expose the system's dependence on your obedience. That makes you dangerous. That makes you powerful. So they frame you as the problem, not the one who finally named the problem. So what can you do? Let's be realistic. Not everyone can quit. Not everyone can go to HR and come out stronger. Not everyone can risk their job just to speak their truth. But you can start reclaiming your power with small, defiant acts. Ask for clarity. Say no when it's unsustainable. Stop apologizing for setting boundaries. Encourage others to do the same. Document everything. Speak up, not just in anger, but in clarity and calm. Because every time you assert yourself, you send a ripple, and one ripple leads to another. The price of being reasonable is often your career, your voice, your well-being. You don't owe that to anyone. You were not hired to be liked. You were not hired to absorb dysfunction. You were not hired to disappear. You were hired to contribute, to create, to matter. And that will never happen if you keep being quiet for the sake of peace. Because peace without truth isn't peace, it's compliance. And in the compliance economy, your silence is someone else's promotion.
Silence in the system. Education, healthcare, and justice. You've been told the system is broken, that it just needs fixing, that things fall through the cracks because of budget cuts, human error, or unfortunate timing. But what if that's not the truth? What if the system is working exactly as intended? What if its greatest strength is not how it operates, but how effectively it silences those it fails? From the moment you enter school to the day you need a hospital or step into a courtroom, you are trained, nudged, and pressured to stay quiet. Not for your benefit, but for the system's survival. Let's examine 3 of the most powerful public institutions: education, healthcare, and justice. They are supposed to protect and serve you, but too often they protect themselves from you. Education, where silence begins. You enter school wide-eyed and curious. You want to know why. You ask endless questions. And what happens? You're told to raise your hand, to wait your turn, to memorize, not challenge, to obey, not explore. And when you start pushing back, you're labeled disruptive, defiant, difficult. Your questions are not welcomed. Your voice is seen as noise, not insight. You are taught, quietly but thoroughly, that success means compliance. Good grades don't go to the bold. They go to those who follow the rubric, write what the teacher wants, and sit still. By the time you graduate, you've learned more than math or literature. You've learned, don't challenge the person in charge, stay in line even when the line makes no sense, and above all, don't make things harder. That training doesn't leave you when you leave school. It follows you for life. Healthcare, where pain is processed, not heard. You walk into a hospital expecting care. What you get is paperwork, waiting, indifference. You say you're in pain. They say, wait. You say something's wrong. They say, we don't see anything. You ask for answers. They give you silence, or worse, blame. And when you finally get a diagnosis, it's rushed. You're handed a prescription and sent on your way. You're not treated, you're processed. The system doesn't want your voice. It wants your compliance. Because every complaint is a delay. Every second of attention is a cost. Every question you ask is a threat to efficiency metrics. So you learn, don't speak up. Don't challenge the expert. Don't expect more. Just be glad you got seen. And if you push too hard, you're labeled as anxious, non-compliant, difficult patient. Your silence isn't just encouraged, it's medically rewarded. Meanwhile, billing departments keep charging. Insurance companies keep denying. Hospitals keep profiting. Because a quiet patient is a profitable patient. Justice, where truth bows to procedure. Nowhere is silence more weaponized than in the justice system. It tells you that truth matters. But what matters more?
What you can prove, what you can afford, what you can't say. Speak without a lawyer and you're warned. Anything you say can be used against you. So you stay quiet. Not because you're guilty, but because you know truth is fragile here. Victims who speak up are re-traumatized. Whistleblowers are punished. Witnesses disappear into fear. You learn that the system listens best when you're rich, connected, or silent. If you are none of those things, you are background noise. And those who should be held accountable, bad cops, abusive judges, corrupt prosecutors, are shielded by policies that value order over justice. Because in this system, truth that makes noise is dangerous. The common thread: silence equals sustainability for them. Across education, healthcare, and justice, you'll see the same formula. Questioning is punished. Compliance is praised. Speaking out is risky. The system profits from your endurance. These institutions are not crumbling. They're stable because you're trained to adapt to their dysfunction. You're expected to study within broken schools, heal within broken hospitals, seek justice within broken courts, and to do so quietly. You might think, but what can I do? These are massive systems. And that's exactly the point. They are massive, so you feel small. And if you feel small, you'll stay silent. But let me tell you this,
Silence is not neutrality, it's permission. And your discomfort, it's the first sign that something still works inside you. The part that knows something isn't right. The part that hasn't been trained out of asking why. Reclaiming your voice in rigged systems. You may not be able to dismantle them, but you can document everything. Ask questions even when it makes people uncomfortable. Share your story when it's safe. Support others who speak up. Teach your children to question earlier than you did. Refuse to call dysfunction normal. Because the moment you stop whispering to survive, you start speaking to disrupt. And systems built on silence, they don't fall all at once. They unravel, thread by thread, as voices return to the people who were trained to forget they had any.
Fear of standing out, the psychological chains. You like to think you're free, that your choices are yours, that your silence is a matter of being mature, staying calm, or picking your battles. But let's be honest, much of your silence is fear. Not of danger, not of punishment, but of standing out. We are not wired for truth. We are wired for belonging. And nothing threatens that belonging more than the act of saying, "This isn't right. I disagree. I want more." Because the moment you break from the group, even for something noble, honest, or brave, you risk exile. Not from a tribe with spears, but from the invisible tribe of modern life. Coworkers, family, friends, social media circles, cultural norms. You don't stay silent because you're weak. You stay silent because you're human. And humans fear rejection more than almost anything. The invisible cost of visibility. Standing out sounds empowering until you realize what it really means. Being questioned, being misunderstood, being mocked, resented, or ignored. You're not afraid of being wrong. You're afraid of being alone in being right. Because when you say something no one else is saying, you're not seen as a leader. You're seen as a threat to the emotional status quo. So you shrink. You say, "It's fine." You say, "Maybe I'm overthinking." You say, "It's not worth the drama." But inside, you're not at peace. You're performing peace to protect yourself. That's not maturity. That's learned silence, a survival mechanism developed over years of subtle rejection. Let's go deeper. Have you ever laughed at a joke you didn't find funny just to fit in? Nodded in agreement in a meeting even though you had a better idea? Kept a boundary to yourself just to avoid ruining the vibe? Let someone mistreat you because you didn't want to seem sensitive? That's not you being chill. That's you negotiating for safety through submission. The cage of not wanting to be a problem. From childhood, you were probably taught, don't make a scene, be polite, don't talk back, keep it to yourself, don't embarrass the family, don't stand out for the wrong reasons. Each phrase was a chain. Each lesson told you conformity equals safety. So by the time you entered adulthood, your default response to discomfort wasn't protest, it was self-silencing. Not because it felt right, but because speaking up felt dangerous. Even in safe environments, your brain replays the threat. They'll think I'm dramatic. I'll lose their respect. What if no one agrees? What if I lose my job? What if I ruin the relationship? And so you say nothing, even when everything inside you is screaming otherwise. This is how internalized compliance is formed. It's no longer enforced from the outside. You do it to yourself. The psychology of group silence. There's a term for this, pluralistic ignorance. It means everyone is thinking the same thing, but no one says it because they all assume they're the only one. So everyone keeps quiet, and the silence becomes proof that everything's fine. This is how bad ideas spread. This is how toxic cultures survive. This is how abusers stay protected. This is how injustice feels normal. And if someone finally speaks, they're punished not for being wrong, but for breaking the silence that kept everyone comfortable. The system doesn't need to silence everyone. It just needs to make an example out of the first one who speaks. After that, the rest will keep themselves in line. Learned helplessness, when silence becomes identity. Over time, when every attempt to assert yourself ends in pain, your brain learns a cruel lesson. Speaking doesn't help. This is known as learned helplessness. It's what happens when you stop advocating for yourself, stop believing change is possible, start internalizing your silence as just who you are. But here's the truth. You weren't born quiet. You were trained to believe your voice has no place. You weren't born agreeable. You were rewarded for staying small. You weren't passive. You were punished for being passionate. And the longer you live this way, the more you forget what it feels like to speak freely without fear. Breaking the psychological chains. You don't have to become loud. You don't have to fight everyone. You don't have to burn everything down. But you do have to catch yourself in moments of self-silencing. Ask, whose comfort am I protecting with my silence? Learn to sit with the discomfort of not being liked. Redefine belonging as places where your voice is welcomed. And say one small truth, even when your voice shakes. Because the only way to rebuild your confidence is to rebuild your voice, one word at a time. You don't owe the world your silence. You don't owe your job your obedience. You don't owe your community your invisibility. You owe yourself truth. And the truth is, you were never too loud. You were just surrounded by people who preferred you quiet. The profit of passive workers. Why industries need you tired and afraid. Ever wonder why you're always exhausted, even when you're doing everything right? You sleep, eat, work, rest, but the fatigue never leaves. Not just in your body, but in your mind. A low, dull ache in your spirit. You're not broken. You're exploited. Because somewhere along the way, the modern economy figured something out. A tired worker is a compliant worker. An anxious mind is an obedient mind. We were taught that hard work is noble, that being busy means you matter, that exhaustion is a badge of honor. But what if your exhaustion isn't a sign of purpose? It's a business model. The industry of burnout. Let's break it down. Modern industries aren't just built on your labor. They're built on your passivity, on your willingness to keep going while quietly falling apart. Because when you're tired, you don't question authority, demand better wages, organize with others, start something new. Think long-term. Make bold moves. You just survive. And that's exactly what the system needs you to do. Tired people don't start revolutions. They don't ask dangerous questions. They scroll. They nod. They get through the day.
and then they do it again tomorrow. You are being managed by fatigue. Your 9 to 5 isn't just work, it's emotional containment. Your email inbox is full. Your manager wants just one more thing. Your weekends are chores. Your evenings are phone calls, bills, errands. So when do you think clearly? When do you question? When do you resist? You don't, because you're too tired to care. And that's the point. The economy is built to keep you at just enough energy to function, but never enough to challenge anything. And when that fatigue starts to show, there's a product for that. Coffee, energy drinks, self-help books, mindfulness apps, sleep trackers, motivational podcasts. You buy relief from a fatigue that was manufactured in the first place. The performance of productivity. In this economy, you're not just a worker. You're a brand, a profile, a high performer. You're expected to be productive, professional, polished, positive, even when you're unraveling inside, especially when you're unraveling. Because if you stop smiling, stop saying yes, stop pretending, you become a liability. And so, you keep playing along. Not because you're okay, but because stopping feels more dangerous than breaking. The industry of fear. Tiredness keeps you moving, but fear keeps you silent. Fear of being replaced, fear of being left behind, fear of disappointing your family, fear of failing in a system that keeps changing the finish line.
You don't just work to earn, you work to stay worthy. Because if you stop, the fear creeps in. What if I'm not enough? What if I never catch up? What if I lose everything? And that fear, that anxiety, it sells. Industries thrive when you're afraid. Insurance, pharmaceuticals, fitness, beauty, real estate, education, all telling you you're not safe, you're not ready, you're not complete unless you buy this. You're not being marketed to, you're being kept on edge. Because anxious people spend more, tired people buy shortcuts, insecure people obey. The wall between you and your voice. And while all this is happening, while you're rushing, reacting, reaching, a quiet wall is building between you and your inner truth. You forget what you value, what you believe, what you wanted, what you deserved. You stop dreaming, you start coping. And your voice, the one that could change things, becomes buried beneath exhaustion and fear. You're not quiet because you don't care. You're quiet because you can't breathe. And the world doesn't care to notice because your breathlessness is profitable. The loop they hope you never escape. You work too much. You get tired. You consume to feel better. You fall deeper in debt. You become afraid of instability. You work even harder. And every loop makes you more obedient, more passive, more profitable. This is not accidental. It is engineered compliance, an economy that keeps you chasing relief instead of questioning why you need it in the first place. Breaking the cycle. You don't need to overthrow the system today, but you can rest without guilt, say no without apology, ask, what am I working toward? Who am I working for? Reconnect with your inner compass. Take one decision, however small, that is based on truth, not exhaustion. Because a rested person is a dangerous thing. A rested person remembers who they are. They question, they speak, they change things. And that is exactly what the system fears. So rest, not just to recover, but to remember.
Because the moment you stop running, you'll hear the voice that's been waiting for you. And that voice, it won't whisper, it will roar. Rigged markets, unfair laws, what happens when we don't speak? You've probably heard the phrase, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. But in today's world, it's worse than that. Because when you don't stand up, you don't just fall. You become the foundation that others build injustice upon. The law is supposed to protect us. Markets are supposed to reward value. Systems are supposed to be fair. But fairness isn't automatic. It's demanded. And when it isn't, the silence of the majority becomes the shield of the powerful. How markets become rigged quietly. Markets don't become unfair through explosions. They evolve through neglect. A loophole is discovered. A regulation is quietly softened. A monopoly forms through silent mergers. Wages stagnate while CEO bonuses multiply. A false sense of competition is maintained while prices are coordinated. And no one notices. Or worse, no one speaks. Because the ones who feel the injustice most are too busy, too tired, or too unheard to fight back. And that's the perfect environment for manipulation. No protest, no pushback, no public outcry. Just quiet compliance. The illusion of choice. You think you're choosing freely between banks, between internet providers, between healthcare plans, between jobs. But if every option is overpriced, exploitative, or designed to confuse you, you're not choosing, you're surrendering. And the silence of millions becomes the approval that corporations wave in front of governments. See, no one's complaining. We must be doing it right. Meanwhile, the wealthy get insider access. The poor get payday loans. The middle class gets squeezed. And the rigged market keeps smiling like it's fair. How laws are passed without protest. Now let's talk about laws. Most people think bad laws happen because of corrupt politicians. That's only half true. Bad laws pass in silence, at midnight, on page 847 of a budget bill, behind closed doors while the public is watching scandals or sports. And when do people usually speak up? After the law is already enforced, after the consequences arrive, after it's too late. Why? Because we weren't reading, we weren't paying attention, or worse, we assumed someone else would speak for us. But they didn't, because they thought the same thing. This is how injustice becomes legal, not because it's right, but because no one fought back when it was wrong. Silence legalizes the unjust. History is full of unjust laws that became normalized. Segregation, child labor, criminalization of poverty, voter suppression, police immunity, tax loopholes for the ultra-rich, corporate bailouts with no accountability. None of these started with the words, "This is evil." They started with, "It's just policy. It's complicated. It's above your pay grade." And when people stayed quiet, those policies became law. And when no one questioned those laws, they became culture. The cycle of legalized inequality. Let's break the loop. Injustice begins in whispers, meetings, drafts, negotiations. It becomes paperwork, bills, proposals, fine print. It becomes law, passed quietly, wrapped in good intentions. It becomes normalized. That's just the way it is. It becomes untouchable. Why fight something that's already legal? And when people stayed quiet, those policies became law. And the time you realize how deep it runs, you're told to be realistic, to adapt, to work harder, to stop complaining. But what you're really being told is, stay silent. It's more profitable that way. How your silence is framed as agreement. The system doesn't need applause. It just needs no resistance. When you don't vote, don't protest, don't question, your silence is recorded as consent. It doesn't matter if you were scared, or busy, or exhausted. Silence is still logged as the people are fine with this. And the deeper tragedy? Many people begin to believe that silence is the only safe option, that speaking up doesn't change anything, that resistance is for someone else, somewhere else, some other time. But here's the truth. What you tolerate today becomes law tomorrow. So what can you do? You don't need to be an activist. You don't need to lead a movement. But you do need to break the silence in your own life. Read what you sign. Vote with your money. Speak up at the small table, not just the big one. Educate your circle, gently, consistently. Question normal if it feels wrong. Support those who resist, even if they're not perfect. Because one whisper won't change the world, but it might wake up someone next to you. And 10 whispers become a voice. And a voice becomes a vote. And a vote becomes a wall they can't pass in silence. Remember this. No law is permanent. No market is untouchable. No system is above scrutiny. But the longer you stay quiet, the louder injustice becomes. And the longer you wait, the more permanent corruption feels. If you're wondering how we got here, look at all the moments when we said nothing. And if you're wondering how we get out, start speaking. Even if your voice shakes, even if no one claps, even if nothing changes immediately, because silence doesn't keep the peace, it preserves the problem.
Whispers at home. How silence shapes families, too. When we think of systems of control, we picture governments, corporations, institutions. But one of the oldest systems, the one that shapes us before we even understand words, is family. And the currency it often trades in is silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that hides things, that buries hurt, that calls survival love and repression maturity. Because for many of us, the first place we learned to stay quiet was at home. Childhood, where obedience is taught as safety. You were told, don't talk back. Stay in a child's place. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. We don't discuss those things in this house. Keep our problems inside these walls. And so you learned early and deeply that love could be conditional, that speaking the truth might get you punished, that questioning an adult meant disrespect, that emotions were dangerous, embarrassing, or simply inconvenient. So you adapted. You swallowed grief. You silenced your needs. You smiled through pain. You made yourself smaller, quieter, easier to love. And the adults in your life, many of them well-meaning, praised you for it. Such a good kid, so mature for your age. She never complains. He doesn't cause trouble. What they didn't realize was this. You weren't being good. You were learning how to disappear. The cost of unspoken things. Families survive on routine,
memory, shared blood. But they often collapse under unspoken pain. Abuse that's never named. Addictions swept under rugs. Generational trauma passed off as tradition. Secrets treated like heirlooms. And no one talks about it because bringing it up might cause conflict, might shame someone, might ruin the family. So the silence stays, and with each generation, it grows heavier. A child raised in silence becomes an adult who doubts their own voice, a partner who tolerates mistreatment, a parent who repeats the same patterns because they were never allowed to name them. Myth of harmony. We often mistake silence for peace. We say, "We don't argue much. We've always been close. It's better not to dig up the past." But real peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of honesty. And in many homes, closeness is just a mutual agreement to not tell the truth. A family without conflict isn't always healthy. It might just be a family where everyone has learned the cost of speaking. Generational silence. Silence is contagious. It moves through generations like a shadow that no one names, but everyone feels. The mother who never said, "I love you," becomes the daughter who never hugs. The father who never cried becomes the son who drowns quietly in pressure. The household where no one talked about mental health becomes the one where no one heals. Each generation inherits not just stories, but emotional blueprints. And unless someone breaks the pattern, silence becomes the family legacy.
The family mirror. Here's the hard truth. The silence you live with as an adult often reflects the silence you were raised in. If you struggle to speak your needs in relationships, look at who taught you those needs were too much. If you apologize for setting boundaries, look at who rewarded you for having none. If you find it easier to stay quiet than to disappoint, look at who made your voice feel like a burden. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness. Because once you see the pattern, you can do what generations before you couldn't: break it. Unlocked. What speaking looks like at home. Speaking doesn't mean yelling. It doesn't mean shaming your family. It doesn't mean setting fire to your history. It means saying, "This hurt me." Asking, "Can we talk about this?" Admitting, "I need something different." Teaching your children what you were never taught. Refusing to carry secrets that aren't yours. Creating space for truth even when it trembles. Speaking in your family may not change them, but it will change you. And sometimes that's what healing looks like. Not fixing what was broken, but refusing to pass it on. The quiet revolution at the dinner table. You don't have to be the loud one. You don't have to confront everyone today. But you can be the one who says, "We don't have to pretend. I want more honesty here. I won't repeat this with my kids. I'd rather be uncomfortable than complicit." Because once truth enters a family, it doesn't leave quietly. It echoes. It softens the shame. It makes room for things like real forgiveness, real connection, real freedom. Silence keeps families looking functional. Truth makes them whole. And if you're the first one to break the silence, it will feel like betrayal. But later, it will be remembered as love. The high cost of keeping the peace. You told yourself you were doing the right thing. You didn't want to upset anyone. Didn't want to ruin the mood. Didn't want to start a fight or make it about you. So you bit your tongue. You smiled through the sting. You nodded when you wanted to scream.
You told yourself it was maturity. You told yourself it was love. You told yourself it was peace. But was it? What you really did was this. You chose silence over truth, comfort over clarity, tension avoidance over transformation. And it didn't save peace, it sacrificed you. What keeping the peace actually means. We hear the phrase all the time. I didn't say anything, I just wanted to keep the peace. Let's not get into that now. Let's just keep the peace. It's not worth the argument. I'd rather keep the peace. But let's ask the real question. Peace for who? Because when you choose not to speak, not to push back, not to draw the line, someone benefits. And it's almost never you. Keeping the peace often means keeping someone else comfortable, keeping appearances tidy, keeping dysfunction running, keeping yourself invisible. We act like silence is neutral, but silence is never neutral. It's a choice, a strategy, a cost. And if you're always the one paying it, that's not peace. That's emotional bankruptcy. The hidden costs of peacekeeping. Here's what it actually costs to keep the peace. Number 1, your mental clarity. You start second-guessing yourself. Did I overreact? Maybe it's not that bad. It's easier not to say anything. Soon, you don't trust your gut anymore. You become so focused on how others feel, you forget how you feel. Number 2, your emotional health. Every time you suppress a truth, you create tension inside. Not just annoyance, resentment. It builds quietly until it leaks out in sarcasm, fatigue, anxiety, or coldness you can't explain. You start to feel distant, not just from others, but from yourself. Number 3, your boundaries. When you let things slide to keep the peace, you teach others how to treat you. They don't even know they're crossing lines because you never told them where the lines were. So you become the easy one, the one who can handle it, the one who never pushes back. Until one day, you snap, and no one understands why. Number 4, your relationships. Ironically, keeping the peace often kills intimacy, because real closeness requires real honesty. If you never speak your mind, if you never share your hurt, if you never say, "This is not okay," then the connection is built on performance, not truth. You don't grow closer, you just grow quieter. Silence creates pretend peace, the kind where you smile at the dinner table, but cry in the bathroom. You say, "I'm fine," with a trembling voice. You laugh at jokes that hurt you. You forgive things that haven't changed. You celebrate milestones while grieving in secret. This isn't peace, it's emotional theater, and you are the actor. The script says harmony, but your soul says help. The fear behind the peace. So why do we do it? Because we fear the alternative, the fight, the fallout, the loss, the awkward silence, the blame, the confrontation. We feared that if we speak up, we'll be seen as difficult, be rejected, make it worse, lose everything. But the longer you avoid the storm, the bigger it grows inside you. And one day, it doesn't explode, it implodes, and you lose everything anyway, but quietly, slowly, invisible to everyone but you. What real peace looks like. Real peace isn't quiet, it's honest. Real peace is telling the truth kindly, clearly without apology, saying no and meaning it, asking for what you need without guilt, creating space where truth is welcome, even when it's uncomfortable, trusting that your discomfort now is an investment in clarity later. It's not easy, but here's the thing. The people who truly love you will grow with your voice, not retreat from it. And the ones who only loved your silence, they never saw you to begin with. Start small. You don't need to burn bridges. You can say, actually, that bothered me. You can say, I'm not okay with that. You can say, this feels unfair. You can say, I love you, but I need to be honest. Even if your voice shakes, even if your heart races, even if you're the first one to ever say it. Because once truth is spoken, peace isn't destroyed, it begins. Final truth. You don't keep peace by staying silent. You build peace by speaking with integrity. You don't keep love by being agreeable. You grow love by being real. And you don't keep yourself safe by avoiding conflict. You keep yourself whole by honoring your truth. So next time you're tempted to stay quiet for the sake of peace, ask yourself, whose peace is this really? And what is it costing me? Then breathe, then speak, then reclaim what silence took from you. The myth of powerlessness. What happens when one voice speaks? From a young age, you were taught to shrink, not because you weren't powerful, but because the world is terrified of what you might do if you believed you were. You were told, it's just how things are. One person can't change anything. You're making it a bigger deal than it is. There's no point in fighting the system. You'll get over it. And slowly, you began to internalize a lie that billions live by. My voice doesn't matter. But what if that's the most dangerous myth of all? How the myth of powerlessness is manufactured. It starts early. You speak up in school, get ignored or punished. You ask hard questions, get labeled difficult. You challenge unfairness, get shut down. Over time, the message becomes clear. Don't bother. You stop raising your hand. You stop calling out injustice. You stop expecting change. Not because you don't care, but because you believe you don't count. And that belief, that quiet hopelessness, is exactly what those in power depend on. The world isn't shaped by the loudest. It's shaped by the quietest people who finally decide to speak. Why the system needs you to stay small. You think you're just one person, but one person has purchasing power, voting power, influence over their circle, the ability to say no, enough, or not anymore, the spark to ignite others. If your voice truly didn't matter, they wouldn't try so hard to suppress it. They wouldn't flood you with distraction, shame, and fear. They wouldn't mock activists or whistleblowers or complainers. They do all that because your voice is dangerous, because one spark lights another, and before long, sparks become fire. One voice is how it starts. Every major movement, every historic change, every culture shift began with one person who refused to be quiet. A woman who sat at the front of the bus. A man who walked out of a job. A student who refused to follow the script. A child who asked, "Why are we treated differently?" They didn't wait to be brave. They just stopped pretending they were powerless. And the moment they spoke, the system flinched. Because silence is strong until it isn't. And when one voice breaks the stillness, it becomes permission for others to do the same. What one voice actually does. You might think, what's the point? It's just me. But when you speak, even if nothing changes immediately, you interrupt the pattern. Break the spell. Plant doubt in the lie. Give someone else courage. Make the injustice visible. Refuse to normalize dysfunction. That ripple may not reach you, but it will reach someone. And that's how systems fall, from within, voice by voice. Silence says yes, even when you mean no. If someone crosses your boundary and you say nothing, they believe they're allowed. If a policy is unfair and no one objects, it becomes precedent. If everyone knows it's wrong, but no one speaks, it becomes law. So what you don't say isn't invisible. It's interpreted as agreement, which means your silence is not protection, it's participation. Your voice is not too small, just too honest for their comfort. You don't need to change the whole world. You just need to tell your story. Say no when something feels wrong. Ask the question no one else is asking. Refuse to normalize what makes you numb. Name the thing that everyone else avoids. Stand up, even if you stand alone, because one voice can feel like a scream in a quiet room, and sometimes that's all it takes. How to begin reclaiming your voice. If you've been quiet for years, it's okay. There's no shame in survival. But today, right now, can be the moment you begin again. Start small. Speak your truth in one conversation. Ask why in a meeting. Write down the things you've been afraid to say. Stop pretending to agree. Let your silence be intentional, not habitual. You don't owe the world your rage, but you do owe yourself your truth. Final reminder: you are not too late. You are not too small. You are not irrelevant. You are simply used to being unheard. But the world has changed every time someone like you, someone tired, someone afraid, someone ordinary, finally decided to stop whispering. So say it, whatever it is. Say it once. Say it gently. Say it loudly. Say it until the world is forced to listen. Rebellion begins with a whisper. How to reclaim your voice. You've been quiet for so long. You might wonder, where do I even begin? The answer isn't in grand speeches, not in viral posts, not in loud protests, unless you're ready for that. Rebellion doesn't always begin with a roar. Sometimes it begins with a whisper to yourself. Rebellion is not rage, it's return. Return to what? To your instincts, to your inner truth, to your ability to say no, not this, to your forgotten questions, to your unmet needs. It's not about being combative, it's about being clear. Because when you've been conditioned to silence, the first act of rebellion is simple but radical. You stop pretending. Reclaim your inner voice. Before you speak to the world, you must unmute yourself to yourself. Ask, what am I tolerating that exhausts me? Where am I saying yes when I mean no? Whose comfort am I protecting with my silence? When did I start believing my voice didn't matter? Journal it. Say it out loud in a room alone. Write it in a note on your phone. Let the words exist somewhere other than inside your locked up mind. You're not wrong. You're just unheard. And that ends today. Identify the smallest true thing you can say. You don't have to start with the scariest truth. Start with one that's still true, but manageable. That comment hurt me. I need more time. I don't agree with that. I've been pretending I'm fine, but I'm not. I'm not okay with how that was handled. Say it where it matters, to someone who matters, even if your voice shakes, especially if it shakes. That trembling is not weakness. It's proof that you're defying the old programming. Make speaking a practice, not a performance. You don't need to be eloquent. You don't need to win. You just need to show up honestly. Let go of the need to be perfectly worded, the fear of being misunderstood, the pressure to convince anyone. You're not responsible for how others receive your truth. You're only responsible for not hiding it anymore. Every time you speak with honesty, even in private, you retrain your nervous system to believe it is safe to be real.
Step 4. Set boundaries without apology. Reclaiming your voice means learning to say, "No, not anymore. I need something different. This doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that." At first, it feels like conflict, but it's actually clarity. Because every boundary you set is a fence that protects the version of you who used to stay silent out of fear. Step 5. Honor the discomfort. It won't feel good at first. It'll feel wrong, disruptive, guilty, exposed. That's not because you're doing something bad. It's because you're breaking the silence that kept others comfortable. Discomfort is part of the detox. Let it come. Breathe through it. You're not being too much. You're finally being honest. Step 6. Find voices that help you rise. You don't have to do this alone. Find people, books, spaces, or mentors who speak truthfully. Let their honesty awaken yours. Silence taught you to survive, but community can teach you to live. If you've been the quiet one all your life, surround yourself with people who don't flinch when you speak. Step 7. Redefine your role in the system. You used to be the one who absorbed, adjusted, endured. Now, you're becoming the one who reflects, resists, and rebuilds. That doesn't mean being loud or angry. It means being conscious. From now on, you don't just work for money, you work with purpose. You don't just love for peace, you love with honesty. You don't just vote for duty, you vote with awareness. You don't say yes by default, you say yes with intention. This is rebellion. Soft, sustainable, sacred. Step 8. Speak even when it doesn't change anything immediately. You may speak up and be ignored. You may tell the truth and still get hurt. You may set a boundary and still get disrespected. Speak anyway. Because every time you speak, you prove to yourself that you exist. And that's where real change begins. Not in others, but in the part of you that once believed you had to be small to survive. Final truth. Rebellion isn't about noise. It's about alignment. When your voice matches your values, when your no is real, when your yes is wholehearted, you are no longer participating in the lie. And the compliance economy, it starts to break, not from explosions, but from the quiet clarity of people who refuse to disappear. So whisper, then speak, then stand. And one day, when the world looks different, you'll know exactly where that change began. With you.
The world doesn't change because the system is strong. It stays the same because we whisper. It's tempting to believe the world is stuck this way, that injustice is permanent, that corruption is inevitable, that silence is safety. But here's the truth that history rarely says out loud. The system isn't strong. It's just built on our hesitation. It doesn't stand because it's fair. It stands because we've been taught not to look too closely, not to speak too loudly, not to dream too boldly.
The world doesn't stay the same because power is absolute. It stays the same because you were told your resistance is meaningless. Every policy that went unchallenged, every harmful norm that became tradition, every cruel structure that turned into routine, none of it lasted because it was unshakable. It lasted because we whispered when we should have spoken, compromised when we should have questioned, nodded when we should have walked away. The price of whispering. We whispered in boardrooms to keep our jobs, in classrooms to avoid standing out, in marriages to keep the peace, in public to avoid discomfort, in private to avoid breaking down. We whispered to survive, but survival is not the same as freedom. And a life of compliance, no matter how stable, is still a cage. The system profits from your restraint, from your fear of being too much, from your habit of playing small, from your belief that someone else will speak. But there is no one else. There is only you and your voice and your choice. The real threat to the system. It's not revolt, not protest, not even legislation. It's awareness. It's one person waking up and saying, I'm done pretending. I'm done participating in things that exhaust me. I'm done whispering when I know the truth. That's where change begins. And it never begins big. It begins honestly. What happens when you stop whispering? Conversations shift. Boundaries appear. Injustice becomes visible. Patterns break. Others follow. You don't have to move mountains. You just have to stop holding them up. And if enough of us do that, the weight collapses. Not in chaos, but in clarity. Final words. Your voice is a vote. Every time you speak your truth, you cast a vote for the world you want to live in. Not the world they designed for you. Not the system that thrives when you're exhausted. But the world where honesty is not punished, where peace is not silence, where dignity is not optional. You were not born to obey. You were born to awaken, to ask, to challenge, to name what feels wrong, to imagine what could be better. That's not rebellion. That's being fully human. So here we are. The end of the video. But the beginning of something else. You choosing to stop whispering. Because the world won't change when it's ready. It will change when you are.
What if no one agrees? What if I lose my job? What if I ruin the relationship? And so you say nothing, even when everything inside you is screaming otherwise. This is how internalized compliance is formed. It's no longer enforced from the outside. You do it to yourself. The psychology of group silence. There's a term for this, pluralistic ignorance. It means everyone is thinking the same thing, but no one says it because they all assume they're the only one. So everyone keeps quiet, and the silence becomes proof that everything's fine. This is how bad ideas spread. This is how toxic cultures survive. This is how abusers stay protected. This is how injustice feels normal. And if someone finally speaks, they're punished not for being wrong, but for breaking the silence that kept everyone comfortable. The system doesn't need to silence everyone. It just needs to make an example out of the first one who speaks. After that, the rest will keep themselves in line. Learned helplessness, when silence becomes identity. Over time,
When every attempt to assert yourself ends in pain, your brain learns a cruel lesson. Speaking doesn't help. This is known as learned helplessness. It's what happens when you stop advocating for yourself, stop believing change is possible, start internalizing your silence as just who you are. But here's the truth. You weren't born quiet. You were trained to believe your voice has no place. You weren't born agreeable. You were rewarded for staying small. You weren't passive. You were punished for being passionate. And the longer you live this way, the more you forget what it feels like to speak freely without fear. Breaking the psychological chains. You don't have to become loud. You don't have to fight everyone. You don't have to burn everything down. But you do have to catch yourself in moments of self-silencing. Ask, whose comfort am I protecting with my silence? Learn to sit with the discomfort of not being liked. Redefine belonging as places where your voice is welcomed. And say one small truth, even when your voice shakes. Because the only way to rebuild your confidence is to rebuild your voice, one word at a time. You don't owe the world your silence. You don't owe your job your obedience. You don't owe your community your invisibility. You owe yourself truth. And the truth is, you were never too loud. You were just surrounded by people who preferred you quiet.